Hello, everyone. We're back again on YouTube and LinkedIn for another exciting episode of the Top Innovator Series. This is where we dive into proven leadership idea, game-changing strategies, and of course, we hear from the brilliant minds behind that. My name is Josef Martens, and I'm thrilled to introduce our guest today. With us today is JP Murphy. JP is the VP of IT at Backblaze, a high-performance cloud storage company for the AI era. Before that, he held tech leadership roles for various organizations, and today we're thrilled to have him with us. JP, it's a pleasure to have you here in the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be speaking with you today. Thank you.
Awesome. So, JP, the topic is leadership. You are not just established, you're very successful in your leadership journey. When you reflect on your own journey, what do you think are some of the reasons for the success that you've had?
Well, I think that there has been not like a consistent, like I haven't had one way of growing or learning, but I think that I would say throughout my journey, I have continue to look for inspiration from other leaders, looking at my peers, um, modeling behaviors that I think are impactful and can help organization. And at different points in my career, my leadership style has had to adapt relative to the needs of the organization, needs of the team,
Mhm.
maturity curve, right? Different financial forces outside of our control in an organization, right? So as you gather all this experience throughout your career, it's sometimes it's like net new, and other times it's,
Yeah.
hey, I have to pull on things that may have worked in the past and maybe obviously tweak it, right? I don't believe one size fits all and one size catch all. But I think that there's you have to be intellectually honest about what has worked,
Mhm.
and also being accountable to yourself where approaches or styles at certain moments weren't right and maybe will never be right, or
Yeah.
you misinterpreted the situation. And so it's I don't think there's any one thing that's driven my leadership journey. I think I think a common theme you may hear from people is that growing up I was competitive in sports, and uh, and that certainly served as, I think, a launching pad as I started my very early parts of my career, and
Yeah.
still today.
And it sounds like adaptability might be a strength, right? When you talk about adapting to the changes that are there. And that's something that I find fascinating, right? Because these changes, these adaptations that we make, I think they really show that we're able to grow and change the behavior that we need to show in a situation. Can you pick one of those situations where you had to adapt and take us through the before and the after, maybe, and talk a bit about
Sure.
where did you bump into a limitation, maybe? Where did something not work in an old behavior or in an old leadership approach? What change did you have to make, and where did you land with that?
Yeah. So, my experience, I'm fortunate to have experience both in the startup and in the public, and working in the public sector as well. And I think where, you work, especially in startups or pre-IPO companies, there is this push and pull between, I'm still fast and nimble and need to provide
Mhm.
clarity for individuals on how to execute. How do I also build for scale and allow for myself to be able to not have to pay for this, pay down the sins of immediate solutions, if you will. And so when I think back at certain, where I've seen this most, it's when companies are, either crossing that chasm of another series of funding or getting ready for IPO. And where I would say I specifically look at an example of where the organization was looking for data to become much more centered in their
Mhm.
decision making loops. And so to do that, there was a need to not just rebuild, but actually to create the entire sort of BI infrastructure, the team,
Yeah.
the people, the process, and the technology. And in doing that, it was about working cross-functionally, managing up and down and across an organization that was global. And where, when I look back, my when I started on that journey to bring this capability to the organization, I originally was trying to be very collaborative,
Okay.
very consensus driven, because we were dealing with so many stakeholders and so many different inputs and needs from both product telemetry, go to market telemetry. And what I realized was taking a step back was, we were spinning our wheels, right? And so,
Mm,
rather than taking what I think was a more consensus driven approach, it was me saying and outlining, the end state that everyone could agree on. But I took the lead in saying, this is how we're exactly going to deliver from
yeah.
phase zero to phase, X to get to this end state, and being more prescriptive around how we got there.
Yeah.
And at times, in a tech leader, especially in the IT space, we are cross-functional, right? Like, I always
Mhm.
think, like, we speak the language of finance and HR and engineering, right? We have this. I love IT because it's allowed me to work across these organizations, and so this was a moment where using that acumen, rather than you know trying to partner or you know I just said, hey, this is how it's going to be done, and demonstrated and outlined how I would suit the needs of the finance team, suit the needs of all these different stakeholders that had to be served by this investment. And ultimately it got us more velocity, and it got us to a place where then we could actually have more more relevant feedback from these individuals, because that that gap between zero and something is enormous, right? When you're, especially when maybe you aren't as technical. And so, it's, you see engineering all uses like concepts of rapid prototyping. And I'd say if you were to wrap up what I did was rather than going from a prioritization and thinking through those prioritization mechanisms, I went to what would be watered down as a rapid prototyping approach on solving this problem, so that our
Mm,
feedback loops were very specific,
yeah.
and we were able to move the conversation from theory to execution and actual deliverables.
Yeah. That's a great example for a change. I really like it a lot. And it also expands what you can do as a leader, right? Because now that you've done it once, you can pull from this almost like from a repertoire.
Yeah, I think
Mm,
at all moments, in your career, you are building, right? You're
mhm.
building for the next decision, the next strategy, the next whatever you need to do. And so, I'm a firm believer, as a leader, as you start to get exposed to more, right? Leaving your domain, silos as much, that it's really important to leverage, concept of pattern recognition,
Yeah.
and use
Okay.
that to detect where something that has worked successfully should work now, or how do you foresee some of those gotchas, so that
Mm,
you can, not that you can, or as a leader, have the ability to solve them all. I think that, but at least knowing, and in knowing who to engage and how to engage individuals across your organization is essential. And I think as a leader, it's really important to
yeah.
know where you have the expertise, but also where you need to go to get the expertise in order to solve the problems properly.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me take a look at your leadership journey from a different perspective, from the perspective of people around you, maybe. I'm sure you had mentors, trusted advisors, role models, people who were just following your journey. When you think of their advice, what they shared with you, or the behavior that they showed, what is something that still sticks with you? What is something that was important to you, or something that had an effect on
Yeah,
you?
I had I've had every type of manager and leader that
Okay.
I've worked with, and good, bad, and indifferent.
Okay.
And there are things to learn from everyone. And so, there are individuals who I've worked for who I've maybe used as the counter example of how we should treat people and how you should enable people and how you can create the right environment for your team to manage up. I think as a leader, one of the best things you can do for anyone that reports to you is to enable your direct reports to how to manage up to me as a leader, so that they are getting the most from me, and they're getting the most out of their career, and they're able to deliver at an excellent level. but I've also had some phenomenal leaders. I'll give a shout out to the good one, which is Anthony Enzo DeMeo. He's now the CEO of Mozilla, and he was someone I worked for at Wayfair, and he really gave me a lot of tools around reading the room, and how to ensure that the message you're delivering is landing, and how to pick up on some of the signs and the types of questions you might be receiving to inform where maybe your message hasn't landed, or how you're presenting data, or how you're
Hmm.
presenting an idea more broadly. And I'd say, that has
Mhm.
served me very well as I've gone throughout my career, because again, in IT, you really do work with a lot of different people, a lot of different expertise and acumen. So, one meeting you might be working with the CFO and financial systems, and next you might be discussing the CEO concepts around project management, right? And so, being able to really understand how to communicate and what really is landing, and be able to pivot in the moment, not just wait to the end of the meeting and realize like, oh, that was a bad meeting, but be able to do it in the meeting in the moment is a skill and a tool that has served me well. And I other managers have will provide coaching, but when I think about things that I really anchor towards, I think about the feedback that I received from him throughout my time reporting to him.
Awesome, awesome. And I fully agree. That is a fantastic skill to have. The way you phrased it at the beginning, right? There are I can't quite remember how you said it. There are the bad leaders, the good ones, and the indifferent ones, something like that. And we learn from all of them. Totally right. And what it also made me think, it's possible to attach some gratitude to all of them, including the bad ones. So I can see some kind of reflection and maybe even outreach. Maybe we can all reach out to even the bad ones, the bad leaders that we had. I know it's painful. Would be painful for me, but I just thought of that. Anyway, so we talked about the past, JP. I'd love to take a look at where you are at the moment, and not a question about organizations or roles or titles or anything like that. It's about your growth again. When you look at where you are today, what is an area where you say there is room to grow, or there is a next for me, there is another step that I want to take, there is something else I can leverage? What might that
Yeah.
be, JP?
I think, what motivates me to continue to improve is being able to really provide impact and value at the macro level of an
Hmm.
organization. That's, really thinking through advising at like the core, at its highest level, the core things, and whether it's areas that require multi-quarter investment strategy,
Hmm.
really trying to iron out true trade-offs between, path A to path B. And my one of the things that I think about, with IT, we're sort of, to a certain extent, we're wired into the organizations a little bit differently than everyone else. And so I really like to pull on that to inform, like, hey, this is a great strategy, but here are our risks. And that we need to solve these risks in order to make this the most optimal outcomes as possible. And so as I think about, continue to develop, it's being able to think through, like, where does the intersection of technology allow for very impactful outcomes. And so where do I continue to learn more? And I also think, and it's a very important, is to learning when to keep it simple, right?
Okay.
Where we live in a world, right, where any LinkedIn article or post is going to be telling you all the complex ways that AI is going to engage and improve your life.
Mm.
And I don't disagree that AI, like, I am a huge proponent on the bandwagon fully. So, like, if there's people want to know if I'm biased, the answer is yes. Um, and so let's just start there. But where we need to think through is where can we apply AI or any technology for that matter in a way that provides like simplicity. And simplicity
Mm.
is, to me, is to think through, well, how do does leveraging a capability in certain parts enable more productivity? How are we overcomplicating trying to solve everything at once versus let's solve this thing, and incrementality, right? I always say that, I think of myself less of an IT leader as more of a B to E leader, business to employee, product leader, right? Because that's what you're doing in
Interesting.
IT.
Okay. Okay.
And so I'm also, I'm always thinking and challenging myself and my teams, right? Is there a more simple approach? Where can we, whether it's, again, pointing at AI, can AI simplify this? Can an automation
Mhm.
simplify this? Does doing this manually actually give us the most robust, safeguarded way of moving forward? And so for me, I think the challenge is, how do I bring practical, approachable solutions to these larger, very impactful areas? I think that is very important as companies revisiting their tech stacks and revisiting their data architectures, revisiting their org designs more broadly,
Mhm.
right? Thinking about this in a means of how can I still provide a ton of value, be robust as an organization, but also is this simple? And simple means
Mhm.
it's easier to onboard people. It's simple means it's easier to instrument. Simple means that we can do this, accomplish a goal, understand it, and pivot and iterate off of it without it being a massive fundamental shift.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the idea of simplifying it. And where my mind is going is, of course, the simplification of leadership. And I would say the human to human interaction is almost the most complex thing you can get. So
Yeah.
how do you really simplify that without becoming simplistic in the process, right? That's
Yeah,
probably
of course, right. Yeah,
mm,
because you can certainly try to oversimplify things, and
right,
you're
right.
like partially solving, and
But
that's very real. And I
mhm,
think the call out, right? People are always the most complex part of all the dynamics within
yeah,
your sort of leadership umbrella. I think that one of the ways that you can ensure that the human to human connections are effective is as a leader really understanding how to communicate with the
mm,
person,
yeah,
and not just from a tone, but also is some people really thrive, they need pre-reads, some people really
mm,
need like a level of
yeah,
bullet points. I think
yeah,
there's different ways and different personas, right? No one in IT is the same, no one in finance or wherever in the organization is the same. So I think it's really important that you as a leader try to understand what might be those motivators for that person. What are the things that they are concerned about? How do they respond to certain communication styles? And optimize your approach to enable them to be as successful. And that I think also helps build trust, right? Because at
mm,
the end of the day, for all the complexity of working with human beings, that when there's a degree of trust and transparency follows and open dialogue, and you're able to strip away some of the distractions that cloud getting to the what is the problem, like what is the simple problem that we need to solve, when there's a level of trust and people are
yeah,
able to operate from that place first.
yeah. That makes sense. Let's take a look at the future, JP. And I know the future is murky. We don't know it. So let's just wildly speculate for a moment.
Of
If we
course.
were to have this conversation again in, say, 5 years' time, what do you think might be different when we talk about leadership?
Oof. What will be different about leadership? Well, I think first and foremost, leadership is going to be predicated on your ability to leverage technology, specifically AI, to optimize your peer-to-peer connections. And that is, I think about, consistent follow-up, from, meetings, right? Like you think your
Yeah,
meetings are going to have, and it's already happening, but you think like in a lot of organizations today, you're going to have people who are using different platforms that more or less do the same things, so the information and exchange. So I think leaders that are able to drive a consistent way of working, I think is going to be the way of the future. I think leaders that are AI native, and so the conversation isn't like, oh, we'll use AI here. It's just it's presumed part of the operating rhythm that you're bringing as a leader. I think that there will be a need um, for individuals to always be at a leadership level, able to be very deep in their domain, but have a very strong understanding of all the disciplines across in a business, and I think that's
Yeah.
become even more and more prevalent as we grow. I don't think there's going to be
Yeah.
as much operational silos in organizations that you think like in a classic world, sales is living in their CRM, finance is living in their ERP, right, and engineers are living in Jira and GitHub, right? And I think you're going to see. Yeah, and I know I'm
I love it.
oversimplifying. Someone's
Okay.
listening is I'm gonna
Right.
get a lot of hate for this. But we only have so much time to talk,
Right.
so I'm gonna go try to make it as
And we'll make it
generic as
simple, like
possible.
we said before, right?
Yeah, and so there I am eating my own dog food on it. But
Right.
I think you're going to see that the leaders that are able to fluidly work across the entire organization are going to be the most effective leaders. Not to
Yeah.
say that subject matter expertise and depth is going to be not valuable, but in order to really orient an organization against a strategy, you're going to need to be able to be fluent in sort of all the capabilities or departments across your org.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it. JP, let me ask you a last question and then we're going to land the plane. If you could
Okay.
make one change about how many leaders are leading, when you look around at what other tech leaders are doing and you could wave your magic wand and make them do something different, what would it be?
I think I'd like to see more people go back to fundamentals.
Okay. Say more. What
I
does that
think
mean?
um,
Uh-huh.
so. Like I think that when I think about fundamentals, that's putting high degree of importance on accountability for themselves as a leader, clear accountability for your
Yeah.
team, cross-functional accountability for how you
Yeah.
support them and how teams should support supporting you. And I think that there are a lot of people looking at things, and there is again, leadership has a huge human component, so there is a
Mhm.
level of complexity there. But I think going back to the fundamentals never goes out of style, and that's
Mhm.
a crisp communication, that's driving clear accountability to your teams, that's being realistic about the balance between individual needs and organizational needs, and finding a place to satisfy both. And at times it's not going to be balanced. I mean, I've been
Mhm.
at organizations where as a leader you have to push your team, right?
Mhm.
And that is those are the quote unquote tough periods.
Yeah.
And I think as a leader, if you are using the fundamentals to say this is why we're doing it, and you communicate it, you set up clear systems of accountability for what they're expected to execute on, that through those tough periods and the good highs and lows, uh, you're able to be impactful. And I read a lot. I'm a very frameworks driven person, so I'm always trying to learn more. And I think that sometimes things get are like overbaked, to be honest. And so for me, when I think about
Yeah.
fundamentals, I'm looking at every situation through the lens of people, process, and technology.
Mhm.
And that to me is like a starting place for understanding how you solve something, what needs to be solved, and any of the cross-functional dependencies up or down to make it to the smooth execution. And
Yeah.
so that's for me where I think about when I think about leaders, double down on the fundamentals and make sure you're doing those well, because that serves as a solid foundation for any other thing. If you want to get more higher on, some people are really into like the DISC assessments, or to engage their teams, or other more complex ways of assessing individuals. Like there's nothing wrong with that, but at the end of the day, you have to do the fundamentals well for those things to be successful.
That makes sense. And I hear the echo to what you said before about the simplification, right? They really go hand in hand, what you described there.
Yeah.
JP, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here. Many insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you for making the time. Bye bye.
Awesome. Everyone else, remember to like, share, and subscribe. Join us again for our next podcast. And most importantly, keep your brain cells active.